Hi everyone, it's Janet and welcome to my channel. Today I've got some tips for you on twist tie cards from Art Impressions. I'll show you some basics like how to stamp and die cut these for best success, but also show you how to line the inside with cardstock and how to color the front of your cards using inks and markers. So let's get started with this project. This is the stamp set I'm going to use for the demo today, and it is the dog twist tie set from Art Impressions. There's actually 8 different sets that you can choose from in this line, and they all work the same way in that there are 2 halves that wrap around each other, whether it's a people, a tree branch, or various animals. They're very cute, and a friend of mine really loves dachshunds, and I've had a couple of them, and she asked me to show how to make this one, so that's how I picked this particular set. Now I'm going to start off and make my card base. This is 9.5 by 5.5 inches. But this is my very first tip, and that is cardstock is key. And there's a couple things about this cardstock that's really important. Number 1, use a heavier cardstock. 110 pound I think is ideal. Number 2, try to use a better quality cardstock for this that is actually probably going to be square. In other words, it's exactly 8.5 by 11, not slightly off of that dimension, because square is very important in order to create the card that is going to have the 2 hearts in the middle match perfectly. With that in mind, with your cardstock, make sure you cut and score your cardstock so that it maintains the perfect dimensions. So in other words, when cutting it, make sure that you're pressing the cardstock against the rail evenly before you make that slice. Likewise, when you're doing the scoring like I'm doing now, that you've pressed it against the rail right along here to make sure that it's nice and even and straight before you do your scoring. Now what you'll want is 2 scores, one at 2 3/4 inches and also at 7 inches, but I've run out of rail to do that, so I'm just going to flip it over and instead score this at 2.5 inches, again making sure the edges are straight. The second key part about the scoring is that when you fold over your scores on these panels, that you make sure everything is still maintained at a straight fold. Again, the straight lines are really, really important. What I mean by this is when you fold over one of the panels, you can see that each side of the panel matches perfectly to the sides of the middle part of the card base. You don't want this folded so that a little bit hangs over the right or left. In most card making, that's not a big deal. But in this particular card, the more accurate you can be about this, the better off the finished product is going to be. So just remember that. I guess, you know, for me, I'm fairly loosey-goosey when it comes to folding my cards up and stuff like that, and it normally doesn't bother anything. But in this particular case, you're going to get a better result just paying attention to that and making sure everything is straight and lines up. All right, let's move on to the next tip. Tip number 3 is going to be how you can line the inside of your panels so that it looks really nice when you open the card up. I've cut 2 panels. They're both 5 1/4 inches tall, and one is 2 3/8 inch and one is 2 5/8 inch. And I just glue them around the edges only at this point, and I put them down so that the edge of that pattern paper is right on the edge of the cardstock. So ideally you would not have any hanging over on the edge of the cardstock, but what you'll end up then is like a 1/8 inch border around the other 3 sides. And you can see there it's not overhanging, it's just nice and flush. Okay, now we can proceed with stamping the images, and I'm going to put this in my MISTI. You can use any stamp positioner tool that you have, but you just want to make sure that you've got it in your tool to be nice and straight as you position these stamps. Now they both have, no matter what the image is, they've got this L-shaped piece in the stamp that hooks in the corner, and you will see what I mean by that. It's a corner guide is really what it is. You don't want to stamp this at all. It's just a guide. So what I found is if you just kind of slide it in, it will catch the edge of your corner on the cardstock, and then push over your image just enough so that the very edge of the line on this belly, for example, is right on the edge of the cardstock. It's a little bit hard to see if you're exactly on that edge, so you kind of move it around and look at it, move it around, and you'll eventually kind of figure out where the edge of that cardstock is. Now, even still, you may be slightly off, but it's okay. We can make it work. Just try to get as close as possible without completely going off the cardstock edge. The second side is done exactly the same way. I'm going to position it. I will put in the stamp using that guide and then go ahead and stamp it. So here you can see the result of that, and really what that guide helps you do is just, if nothing else, it makes sure that your dogs or your figures are really close to the same height from the bottom. Then we can use the dies to cut the card. There's 2 pieces with each set. I want to show you first on the right side. Now the thing with these dies are there is no cutting blade or edge right along the horizontal. It's really at the point there and the point there. So don't worry about that side lining up perfectly with the side of your cardstock. Think about the points more and the rest of it will come. Now I think the most important thing though, even above that, is to make sure that your die is positioned well around the dog in this case, so that it's well positioned to be a fairly even edge around your stamped figure. If you're slightly off on the cut on the edge, we can fix that, and I will show you that. On this side, everything worked perfectly. It cut it right through on each side of the die, and you can see on the back how pretty and finished that looks. That's exactly what I'm aiming for, rather than just having the raw cardstock. Now for the other side, I had a little bit more of a challenge. When I tried to line up the dog's face, I found that I really was a little bit off on the top of that heart. It didn't reach all the way to the edge of the cardstock, and probably it's because the stamp is a polymer material which is flexible, and so when I pushed the stamp over, I probably pushed it too much and bent it over too much, and therefore it was a little bit off when I went to go cut it. It's not a fault of the product. It's just a function of the polymer that's used for clear stamps that can happen. So it cut the bottom part of the heart perfectly, but at the top here I was about a 1/8 inch short, so I just snipped that and that released the piece. And I only had to do a little tiny bit of trimming right there to make it look nice and even. And now it's the moment of truth. You can fold over the panels and see how your hearts match up. And you can see on this one that they match up very well. And this is not luck, it is because we were very careful about making the lines straight, the cuts straight, and the folds straight. And that will make sure that your heart matches up. Now I went ahead and colored up my wiener dogs, and you can see that the back sides here, you don't see any of that color come through. I had off camera just put a little bit of glue behind each head on the pattern paper side so that that would be secure, and that's all it's required. Now what I'm pointing out here is that I think we can get a little bit more of this dog on the right side to show, and I think it looks a little better because at the moment it cuts off, the cardstock is cutting off the wag of the tail on the brown dog. So I'm just moving this in, and I'm going to do a straight cut from that about the center of the dog down. It's a little more than a 1/4 of an inch, but not as much as a 1/2 an inch. Just kind of eyeball it if you want to do this yourself. It's not required by any means. I just thought it added a little something to the card. So after I made that slice, then I could go ahead and trim out the rest of the white cardstock that is showing there after I've colored the image in. And then when I twist it up, you're going to see a little bit more of that brown dog's tail, and also you're going to see some of his paw. So if we put it together like I'm doing here, you'll see what I mean. See, now we have a pretty good view of the dog's wag and a little bit of his paw, which I prefer that look more. Now each of these sets will be slightly different that way, and you can decide how you want to handle it. Now I'm on to my last tip, which is how to use inks and Copics to decorate the front of this card. You can't really do that before you do the stamping and die cutting, so it has to be done afterwards, and this is how I solve for it. I first cut a square piece of copy paper, 5 by 5 in size, and I lined it up, as you can see here, flush with the bottom and about in the middle, and outlined the heart section that's in one of the panels with a pencil. Then move over the next panel, line up that heart shape, and finish drawing the piece of the heart that's on this side. And that is not the full heart, but it's enough to protect your work that you've done so that you can do some inking and some Copic coloring. So I'm going to take the shortest line. I drew a line across that as straight as I could, and then I trimmed it out, leaving about an 1/8 of an inch, or maybe a little more than 1/8 of an inch, just barely, around the heart image. And this is so that it will cover and protect the area of the heart where the stitching is that's created by the die. And you just match up the center of the heart, push it up so that the bottom of the template is even with your card base. Use a little bit of washi tape to secure it, and then start using your cloud template. The first cloud image that I put in there didn't at all come near the heart shape, so I didn't even use it. But as I needed to start covering over the area where the heart is, then I use that mask to protect it. And when I apply the ink, I try as much as I can to start in the center and work out from left and then center to right. And this helps the applicator to not catch on that mask and then put color where I don't want it. At the end, I'm creating more or less a horizon line by applying the oxide ink just across the straight part of the mask. And you'll see when I remove it that it does create this horizon line, and everything that I do below that is going to be ground and grass. So at this point I finished off the card by putting in some Copic details of grass and some flowers with some bling, and finished up this card. Well, I hope you found the 5 tips that I've given you here helpful for making the twist tie cards from Art Impressions. If you've got one already, bring it out again and give it a try following these tips. And if you've never tried one of these, you definitely need to. Go ahead and go to the store and you can pick up any number of the 8 different designs. Thanks for being here today. I so appreciate the time you spend with me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Also, I've got a couple more videos that you may want to watch if you like this one. I encourage you to stay a little while longer and pick up a few more tips and tricks for your card making. Take care, and I'll be back soon with another video.